A simple woman, mocked in court, her legal genius leaves them in shock-full story. 800 words. They called her a fool. A small town nobody who dared to enter the hallowed halls of justice without a fancy degree or an expensive lawyer at her side. Courtroom whispers swirled the moment she set foot inside judges' attorneys, and onlookers couldn't fathom why this unassuming woman believed she had any right to take on a case that seemed doomed from the start. Yet they were all about to witness a most unexpected turn of events, one that would shake their faith in the status quo and leave them gasping in disbelief. This is the story of how a simple woman silenced the naysayers and stunned an entire courtroom. Mary Bridger never saw herself as anyone special. Hailing from a dusty town on the outskirts of Bakersfield, California, she led a humble life. Her world revolved around morning chores, a modest desk job at the local feed store, and long evenings of reading old mystery novels she borrowed from the library. Despite her simple lifestyle, Mary had a fiercely independent spirit. Having lost her mother at a young age and her father soon after, she'd learned early on that if she wanted something done right, she often had to do it herself. Her biggest challenge arrived on a sweltering June afternoon when she received an official-looking letter from a well-known corporate entity, Clayton & Teller, a massive construction and land development company. Mary's modest homestead, which she had inherited from her parents, lay on land the company coveted for an upscale housing project. Their tactics were bold. They planned to force her out through a series of dubious legal maneuvers. The letter she held in trembling hands was a notice that the company was suing her, claiming she was illegally occupying land they now said belonged to them. Confusion gripped her. For over 70 years, her family had lived on that piece of property. Somehow, paperwork was missing from the courthouse archives, or so Clayton & Teller alleged. She had 30 days to vacate or face severe financial penalties. Mary's heart pounded with anxiety, but determination soon replaced her fear. She decided right then and there to fight with every ounce of grit she possessed. Mary began by knocking on the doors of several lawyers in Bakersfield. Each attorney shook their head gently, explaining that Clayton & Teller had endless resources, armies of lawyers, money to burn, and friends in high places. Even if Mary found someone willing to represent her pro bono, it would be an uphill battle. Some lawyers hinted that the best route was to cut her losses and walk away with whatever meager deal might be offered. But that wasn't good enough for Mary. This was her home, the only home she had left. She refused to let unscrupulous suits uproot her life without a fight. When the attorneys told her there was little hope, she thanked them politely, left their offices, and resolved to forge another path. She spent her weekends at the public library, poring over state land records, the California Civil Code, and anything else that could give her insight into the workings of property law. She read sections of the Harvard Law Review. It seemed intimidating at first, but Mary possessed a surprisingly analytical mind. Growing up, her father had taught her how to dismantle and rebuild a car engine. If she could comprehend the intricacies of pistons, spark plugs, and timing belts, she believed she could dissect legal statutes too. Eventually, the day arrived when she stood inside the Los Angeles Superior Court for her first hearing. The high ceilings and polished floors seemed to swallow her tiny frame. Opposite her sat the well-groomed legal team of Clayton & Teller, 3 lawyers in immaculate suits, glancing at her with condescension. Word of her case had spread through the small-town grapevine. Folks whispered about poor Mary alone and misguided, attempting to outsmart corporate giants. In the corridor, she overheard 2 junior clerks murmuring to each other that this unrepresented woman doesn't stand a chance. She felt the sting of their words, but refused to succumb to despair. When called to the front, Mary introduced herself, her voice quivering only slightly. The lead counsel for Clayton & Teller. A man named Brian Hall eyed her with a mixture of disbelief and pity. He insisted that Mary had no standing to represent herself effectively, that her argument was baseless, and that the court should dismiss her claims outright. The judge, the Honourable Deborah King, looked at Mary over the rim of her glasses and said, "Ma'am, I sincerely hope you understand what you're up against." Mary inhaled slowly. She'd spent every spare hour studying meticulously, documenting evidence of her family's decades-long residence and rightful ownership. She showed the judge how her parents had paid property taxes, how her grandfather had built a small barn on the property in 1951, and how water and electricity bills had remained in her family's name since the early 1930s. She had the receipts, old bank statements, even black and white photos with dates stamped on them. When the judge asked her a question about the potential conflict between the old land grants and the modern registry, Mary carefully explained how certain grandfathered laws worked under the California Civil Code sections 1006 and 1007, using direct quotes, statute numbers and references that left the opposing counsel momentarily speechless. Sniggers transformed into stunned silence. Even Judge King appeared taken aback by Mary's clarity. Brian Hall tried to interject with legal jargon, but Mary countered with well-prepared retorts, explaining that she had learned from her research that quiet title action was exactly the remedy needed in this case. That first hearing ended with Judge King granting Mary a continuance to gather more documentation, an unthinkable victory for someone who had walked in alone. After that first encounter, word spread about the simple woman who outsmarted a team of lawyers. Reporters from the local news took mild interest interviewing Mary outside the courthouse. Meanwhile, Brian Hall and his partners at Clayton & Teller seethed. They had hoped to scare Mary into submission with intimidation and procedural complexity. Instead, she was unwavering. Behind closed doors, the corporate attorneys redoubled their efforts. They dug up obscure loopholes and combed through century-old records looking for anything to discredit Mary's claim. They even hired private investigators to rummage through her personal history. Mary sensed she was being followed. Cars idled by her gate longer than usual. Strangers asked her neighbors intrusive questions, and she discovered her trash can rummaged through on multiple occasions. One night, a suspicious brush fire threatened her property. The fire department came swiftly, and they extinguished the blaze before serious damage ensued. But a gnawing sense of vulnerability gripped Mary. Someone clearly wanted her rattled. Instead of cowering, she documented every suspicious incident, every phone call, every photograph of an unknown car parked nearby. She made copies, stored them in a fireproof box, and even mailed duplicates to a trusted friend out of state. She wasn't about to be blindsided. A few days after the second hearing was scheduled, Mary got a call from a local advocacy group, the Bakersfield Citizens Land Alliance. They had heard about her plight and wanted to help. The group's founder, Rosa Alvarado, had spent years fighting big developers over farmland protection. Though not a lawyer, Rosa was well versed in activism and community organizing. At first, Mary was hesitant to accept help. Her father had taught her to be independent. But Rosa brought resources Mary didn't have. She connected Mary with environmental experts who testified that the land in question was ecologically unique, adding another layer of protection. She brought in genealogists who helped Mary establish her family's presence in the region through old census data. Most importantly, Rosa shared moral support, reminding Mary that she wasn't alone. Clayton & Teller made their next move by filing a motion to exclude Mary's genealogical evidence, citing technical insufficiency. They also attempted to expedite the trial date, hoping a compressed timeline would leave Mary unable to gather the evidence she needed. But Mary had grown adept at reading case law and procedural rules. She found a recently upheld precedent in the California Appellate Court that clearly allowed genealogical documentation as circumstantial evidence in land disputes. In the next hearing, Mary calmly handed the judge a printout of the appellate court ruling. She referenced it by name and explained how the precedent directly supported the inclusion of her genealogical proof. Judge King listened occasionally, glancing over at Brian Hall, who sat there visibly irritated. When the judge sided with Mary, allowing the genealogical evidence, Hall's expression hardened. Outside the courtroom, reporters began to crowd around Mary. This time, the headlines were more sensational. Self-taught land defender. Triumphs. Again, Mary tried to keep a level head, politely answering questions but refusing to gloat. Behind the scenes, Clayton and Teller's board of directors grew impatient. Brian Hall was called into a meeting with the company's CEO, Samuel Clayton. The corporate titan loomed behind a massive mahogany desk, demanding to know why a nobody was winning legal motions against a top-tier legal team. Hall insisted that the judge was showing favoritism, or that Mary was receiving outside counsel. But the truth was simpler. Mary had simply done her homework, and she had the facts on her side. Hall swore he would dismantle Mary's defense by any means necessary. He hinted at using creative strategies to undermine her credibility. In the following weeks, Mary was subpoenaed for bizarre depositions, forced to answer personal questions about her finances, her relationships, and every aspect of her life. They rummaged through her employment history at the feed store, looking for any slip that could be exploited. Mary endured it all with quiet resilience. She never wavered from her calm and straightforward manner. While it was emotionally draining to be under such scrutiny, her steady resolve only fueled her determination. Day after day, she piled up well-organized evidence and references, as if building an impenetrable fortress around her rightful claim. Just when Mary believed she'd seen all their tactics, a shocking revelation landed on her desk, a newly discovered set of land transfer documents dated 1946, claiming Mary's grandfather had sold the property. The alleged documents bore a signature that matched her grandfather's name. Brian Hall presented them to the judge as the ultimate proof that Mary's family had relinquished ownership decades ago. Mary felt her heart drop. She had combed through her family archives and never come across such a transaction. Fear threatened to unravel her, but instead of panicking, she carefully scrutinized the newly produced papers. Something about the signature seemed off. Her grandfather's official name had been James Bridger, but among family, he had always signed letters as J.B. or Jim. The scrawled signature on the new deed read James P. Bridger, with a middle initial no one in her family had ever heard of. Moreover, the notarization stamp was from a notary public who, according to her genealogical research, wouldn't have been operating in the county until the early 1950s. Armed with these suspicions, Mary visited the county registrar's office. She uncovered that the notary in question only received her license in 1952. The deed was dated 1946. This discrepancy was glaring. With assistance from an archivist, Mary found more irregularities in the typed text, certain legal phrases that weren't standard in that era. It all pointed to one conclusion: the document was fabricated. The day Mary revealed her findings in court was electric. Brian Hall had just introduced the 1946 deed as Exhibit A, crowing that it invalidated Mary's entire claim. Cameras clicked as journalists leaned in, eager for the final blow to Mary's case. Judge King reviewed the deed, glancing over to Mary, who remained uncharacteristically silent. When it was Mary's turn, she approached the witness stand with a calm confidence. She placed a certified copy of a notary licensing record on the stand, then meticulously highlighted the inconsistencies in the document's date. the notary's license timeline, and the unusual presence of modern legal terms in a supposedly old document. Brian Hall repeatedly objected, but the judge overruled him, clearly intrigued. The final dagger landed when Mary provided testimony from the county archivist, who via an official affidavit confirmed the deed's notary stamp design didn't exist until 6 years after the document's stated date. Gasps spread through the courtroom as Mary then suggested that Clayton and Teller, or someone working for them, had forged these papers to strengthen their case. The judge's expression shifted from cautious neutrality to thinly veiled anger. Fabrication of evidence was serious. If proven, it could lead to criminal charges. Hall stumbled through half-baked defenses, claiming they'd only recently received the documents from a third party. Judge King ordered an immediate investigation. News coverage exploded. The local station, KGET 17, reported on the potential forgery scandal. People who had once mocked Mary now rallied behind her, outraged by the possibility that a giant corporation would stoop to such tactics. Online forums erupted with heated debates, some doubting Mary's innocence, others championing her unwavering bravery. Meanwhile, the Bakersfield Citizens Land Alliance organized a small protest outside the courthouse, carrying signs that read, "Don't steal our homes," and "Justice for Mary." Despite the public support, Mary found herself on an emotional roller coaster. She was exhausted from the relentless depositions, the legal paperwork, the suspicious phone calls. Still, her resolve never wavered. She reminded herself that this was her family's legacy. She couldn't let greed rob her of her heritage. With Clayton and Teller's case in jeopardy, Mary braced for one final legal ambush. Instead, something unforeseen happened. A middle-aged woman appeared in court one afternoon, requesting to speak to Mary privately. Her name was Cecilia Smith, a paralegal who had once worked for Clayton and Teller. She confessed that she'd witnessed unethical activities, specifically discussions about manufacturing false documents. Her conscience weighed heavily on her, and she offered to provide Mary with inside emails, memos, and recorded calls that could prove the corporation's wrongdoing. Mary was both relieved and cautious. She knew she had to tread carefully. Accepting stolen documents or illicitly obtained information could compromise her integrity. With the guidance of Rosa Alvarado and a local attorney from the Citizens Land Alliance, Mary arranged for Cecilia Smith to make an official statement under subpoena, ensuring her testimony was introduced lawfully. When Brian Hall realized a former employee was willing to testify, he grew desperate. Rumors circulated that he had personal stakes in the outcome of the case. He was due to receive a large bonus if Clayton and Teller secured the land development deal. His colleagues distanced themselves. The more they tried to bury evidence or pass blame, the deeper they sank in the quicksand of their lies. During a special hearing, Cecilia Smith described a meeting where a top executive with Hall present ordered her to explore alternate channels to find or create old land records that would nullify Mary's claim. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Judge King's gaze was ice cold. Mary watched in amazement as the same attorneys who once mocked her scrambled for excuses. Hall tried to discredit Cecilia's testimony as revenge for a workplace dispute, but the judge allowed the presentation of email chains that directly implicated Clayton and Teller in forging the 1946 deed. Judge King had seen enough. In a scathing decision, she dismissed Clayton and Teller's case against Mary, effectively restoring Mary's rightful ownership of her property. But the repercussions for Clayton and Teller were far from over. The court recommended an investigation into corporate misconduct, opening the door to criminal charges. Brian Hall and several executives faced potential disbarment and legal action. The once invincible corporation watched its stock plummet as news agencies, including the Los Angeles Times, reported on the monumental scandal. For Mary, the moment the gavel came down was surreal. A wave of relief crashed over her, accompanied by the realization that her ordeal had truly ended. That night she wept tears of exhaustion and triumph tears for her father and mother, who had instilled in her the fortitude to stand tall. Brian Hall's downfall was swift. His license to practice law was suspended, pending a formal ethics review by the California Bar Association. Investigations revealed that forging deeds was just the tip of the iceberg. He had engaged in questionable financial dealings for years. Clayton and Teller declared bankruptcy within months, unable to recover from the legal blow, the massive public relations nightmare, and a string of subsequent lawsuits by others who claimed the company had tried similar tactics. News outlets reported that executives lost their mansions to foreclosure. Hall, once a man of pomp and swagger, was later spotted in humiliating circumstances, rumored to be living off a dwindling retirement fund with minimal prospects of ever returning to a courtroom. His peers who once ridiculed Mary found themselves jobless, reputations in tatters. Indeed, karma showed no mercy. Mary returned to her quiet life on the farm. Though her routine changed in subtle ways, she now juggled frequent phone calls from neighbors seeking advice on property lines or landlord disputes. She'd become an unlikely local celebrity, known for her tenacity and intellect. Some even suggested she pursue a formal law degree, but Mary laughed it off, saying she'd had enough legal drama to last a lifetime. Still, she volunteered to help the Citizens Land Alliance in their campaigns, eager to pass on her newfound knowledge so that others could protect themselves from predatory developers. She decided to repair and modernize her old farmhouse a bit, using some of the settlement money the judge had granted her for legal fees and damages. Rosa Alvarado arranged a small volunteer crew to help rebuild her barn, which had suffered minor damage from that mysterious brush fire. The sense of community solidarity was stronger than ever. In the quiet that followed, Mary often found herself reflecting on the entire ordeal. She realized that she had walked into the courtroom alone, but had emerged with the unwavering support of her community. In the darkest moments, when investigators stalked her, when she felt outmaneuvered, her determination and refusal to give up kept her going. Those who had mocked her were forced to reconsider the power of an ordinary individual's perseverance. It wasn't about having expensive suits or advanced degrees. It was about resolve, honesty, and courage. She hadn't sought glory or fame. She had only wanted to stand up for what was rightfully hers. Mary's victory set a precedent, encouraging others in similar battles. Stories surfaced of farmland owners, single mothers, and retired couples uniting to challenge land grabs. Some cited Mary Bridger's case as inspiration, using her arguments, and even referencing her name in legal briefs. Law professors at the University of California, Berkeley, included her case study in discussions about self-representation and the inherent power individuals wield when they educate themselves on the law. Stranger yet was the shift in how local businesses approached land deals. No one wanted to risk another fiasco that might tarnish their reputation or expose unethical practices. Some corporations adopted clearer, more transparent policies. Though not a complete transformation of the system, Mary's ordeal opened eyes and initiated conversations that would have been unthinkable a year prior. Reflecting on her journey, Mary realized that every court document, every late-night research session, and every moment of fear had led her to a profound understanding. Knowledge truly is power, and truth can prevail even against the mightiest Goliath. She'd stood in the shadows of polished attorneys and corporate giants who believed they could buy justice. In the end, their arrogance became their undoing. Her modest upbringing, her hands-on approach to problem-solving, and her genuine respect for the law had saved her. The once derisive whispers about that simple woman in court had shifted to admiration and gratitude. Local kids would point and say, "That's Mary Bridger, the lady who beat the big corporation." She blushed every time, unaccustomed to such attention, preferring the quiet hum of her farmland to the glare of cameras. Months later, Mary and Rosa traveled to Sacramento to speak before a small legislative committee examining potential reforms in property law, specifically ways to discourage corporate fraud. The bill wasn't groundbreaking, but it proposed stricter penalties for forged land deeds and reinforced better record-keeping standards. Mary spoke softly but powerfully, describing her experience in an earnest tone that left the committee members visibly moved. Her testimony proved to be a valuable push, helping the bill pass to the next stage of review. For Mary, it felt like an act of closure, turning her painful journey into a constructive path forward for others. Finally, life settled into a rhythm once more. But Mary's sense of purpose remained. She'd discovered the satisfaction of using her mind to solve complex challenges. Now she dedicated weekends to coaching fellow residents on reading official documents and understanding their rights. Friends joked that Mary had become Bakersfield's unofficial legal guardian. She simply smiled. The intimidation she had once felt stepping into a courthouse was gone. She knew she could hold her own, and if she could, others could as well. Many asked why she never sued Clayton and Teller for millions in damages. Her response was always the same. "I only wanted what was mine." Nothing more. Her humility remained her greatest strength. In the evenings, Mary would sit on the porch her father built, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She'd listen to the soft clucking of chickens in the yard, or the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance, feeling a peacefulness she once feared would be lost forever. Her home, her land. It all felt sacred now, tied to her ancestors' labors and her own unwavering spirit. Occasionally her mind flashed back to those tense courtroom scenes, the sneers from expensive lawyers, the hollow echo of the judge's gavel, the hush of a crowd witnessing the unthinkable. She would smile, thinking they never saw it coming. Indeed, it wasn't the degrees or corporate budgets that triumphed. It was courage, meticulous effort, and a simple woman's unwavering determination to stand her ground. As the years passed, Mary's story achieved a kind of legend in the region. High school students wrote essays about it for civics class. A fledgling documentary crew approached her about filming a short series on property rights. She agreed on the condition that it would focus not on her, but on the broader message of standing up for justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The crew interviewed neighbors, attorneys, and even a few reformed business people, weaving together an account of Mary's case that would inspire thousands when it aired on public television. In the final clip of the documentary, Mary stood on her land, a gentle breeze lifting her hair. She held a tattered photograph of her father by the barn. "He always told me, 'You're stronger than you know,'" Mary said, her voice catching slightly. And I guess he was right. That became the enduring quote. People remembered, emblazoned in articles and across social media posts. "You're stronger than you know." Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, one that reminds us that truth and integrity can triumph over intimidation and deceit. Mary Bridger's fight for her home showed us the power of perseverance, the importance of knowing our rights, and the remarkable impact a single individual can have when guided by courage and determination. If you found inspiration in Mary's story, please take a moment to support this channel. By liking this video, sharing it with friends and family, and subscribing, you help ensure stories of everyday heroes and hard-earned justice reach more people. Let's stand up for one another. Take heart from Mary's relentless resolve, and remember that even simple individuals can wield extraordinary power in the face of adversity. Together, we can spark change. One voice, one story, one act of courage at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.